Gratitude Gosho from page, what is it? Yeah, 41 on volume 1, but we're actually now done with reading the Gosho. That was last week. Last week we got through to page 103 where it starts to begin in the lecture, Teaching for Victory, where it says, vanquishing the devil king of the sixth heaven. I'm going to back up again as I usually do and go into it. If you go back to page 101, I think a good spot to start for tonight and read all the way through. And I'm going to read a little bit from the Lotus Sutra if I get a chance. So let's go ahead and get started. It's on page 101, the last paragraph. The letter begins with confident words that attest to the Daishonin's unshakable conviction in the correctness of his actions. Okay, so what I wanted to add this week in reading that, though, what are they talking about? The letter begins with the confident words that attest to the Daishonin's unshakable conviction in the correctness of his actions. So what is his incredible, unshakable conviction? What is the correctness of his actions? Do you understand what specifically they're referring to there? Anybody? Okay, again, his unshakable conviction is that he's the votary of the Lotus Sutra and the latter day of the law, that his teaching, again, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the law that's referred to in the Lotus Sutra as far as Nichiren is concerned. That's his hypothetical at this point in time. That's the initiation of his teaching, of his Buddhism. Do understand that. So what he's saying is the letter begins with the confident words that attest, that attribute to Nichiren that he has this unshakable conviction that what he is saying is the correct way to read the law, to read the Lotus Sutra, is the correct way to read the Lotus Sutra. All right? He says, concerning, this is quoting, concerning my present exile, there are two important matters that I must mention. One is that I feel immense joy. And near the letter's end, he states the second of the two important matters is that I feel intense grief. Now, both that reason for that joy and the reason for that grief are contained in chapter 10 of the Lotus Sutra. Okay? He says, he felt a tremendous sense of joy at being able to read the Lotus Sutra with his life, risking even death, but at the same time he was deeply grieved by the fact that those who were persecuting him were creating negative karma through their actions, which is all stated in the Lotus Sutra. His words indicate a state of mind that seems quite extraordinary coming from someone in the dire situation of exile in 13th century Japan. Allow me now to briefly summarize these two important matters based on relevant passages of this letter. With regard to the first important matter, this is now at the top of page 102. With regard to the first important matter of immense joy, the circumstances in which Nichiren found himself were harsh in the extreme, the exact opposite of what one would normally be described as inspiring joy. He begins by explaining that this world in which we dwell is known as the Sahe world, or world of endurance, where one has no other option but to endure sufferings. It is inhabited by people steeped in the evil karma who have been rejected from the pure lands of the 10 directions. The devil king of the sixth heaven, he says, is hard at work to prevent the people of this world from attaining enlightenment. In the latter day of the law, moreover, the three poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness intensify in people's lives, and anyone who dares to spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra will inevitably face abuse and persecution from arrogant individuals who have been possessed by evil demons. Okay? Everybody's with me? That's what he actually stated in the Gosho itself. Okay? But where is he just making that up as he goes along? No, that's from the Encouraging Devotions chapter, as well as the Teacher Law chapter, as well as other places in the Lotus Sutra. What he's doing is he's reading with his life the Lotus Sutra. So he's extrapolating what does the Lotus Sutra say and understanding how to incorporate that into the actions of himself as a human being in order to bring forth the nature that the Lotus Sutra promises is the potential of those that practice and understand and propagate it as it is taught in the Lotus Sutra to do so. So he's saying Nichiren underwent persecution in the form of exile, just as predicted in the Lotus Sutra. So he's going like, okay, I've been exiled. That's one down, right? An exile that resulted from his efforts to lead all people in the evil age of the latter day of the law to enlightenment. From what? How? How did he do that? Think about it. Did he teach them the Lotus Sutra? Did he teach them to be disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha? No. In fact, he even talks about Ichinen Sanzen. And where does Ichinen Sanzen come from? It's based on the Lotus Sutra, but it's from Tintai. Okay, it's based on Kumarajiva's translation of the Lotus Sutra too. Don't forget, there's specificity as far as that's concerned. So when it says here, he resulted from his efforts to lead all people in the evil age of the latter day of the law, which is prophesied and described in the Lotus Sutra, through expounding what the law is that had been referred to in the Lotus Sutra but had never been revealed, that could only be revealed in the fifth 500-year period. Understand that he has on September 20 or on April 28th, 1253, just a few years before this, introduced and chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo for the first time, right? So he's gone off on a different tangent than anybody that's preceded him. And he's now qualifying that this is what's leading to him fulfilling the prophecies of the Lotus Sutra to validate the teaching that he's now bringing forth for the first time. The great pure law of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Do you understand? So he's creating the bridge from the teaching of the Lotus Sutra that exists in reality, that we validate in our own life because we chant his Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to the object of devotion that he left, and it's all predicated on the teaching and direction of the Lotus Sutra, but it's actually based on his Buddhism the sowing. Do you understand? All right, so he's saying, and that's why he's leading all people. His efforts to lead all people in the evil age of the latter day of the law to enlightenment is to get them to all embrace Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay? It is in this respect that he reads the Lotus Sutra with his life, President Ikeda says, prompting him to exclaim elsewhere in this letter, for anyone born human, what greater joy could there be than to be the Buddha in their present form? To read the Lotus Sutra with our lives means to actualize the Buddha's intent. It means to fulfill our vow for Kosen Rufu, that is, to carry out the noble mission of leading all people to enlightenment in the evil age after the Buddha's passing. When we read the Lotus Sutra with our lives, we can open the way for Kosen Rufu into the eternal future. How? Yeah, but we're not just chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, are we? Huh? When we read the Lotus Sutra with our lives, what are we doing? We're practicing as bodhisattvas of the earth. We're revealing Buddhahood in our present form. Okay? But that's why he's saying it means to fulfill our vow for Kosen Rufu. So what does that mean? Not only to chant, but to study and to also teach others. Correct? All right. So that's what he's talking about here, President Ikeda, and that's what the Daishonin is actually talking here in the form, initial stages of his teaching. Actually, in the Izu Peninsula, he hasn't gone to Sado for a while yet. When we dedicate our lives to the top of the second column of page 102, when we dedicate our lives to the great vow of the Buddha for the happiness of all people, which is what? Kosen Rufu, we can attain a state of being brimming with the boundless joy of the law, a state of unsurpassed happiness, which is Buddhahood in our present form. Do you understand? Only by virtue of that, though. When we dedicate our lives, not just from chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that's the point I'm trying to make. It's more involved than that, okay? That's hearing the name and the words of the truth, or the initial stages of advance and stage 1, 2, or 3, right? when we dedicate our lives to the great vow of the Buddha for the happiness of all people, so when we dedicate our lives to the vow for Kosen Rufu, rather than practice for just ourselves, okay? When we acquire the same mind or aspire to have the same mind as Nichiren, listening to the entirety of his teaching and extrapolating that into our own life through the wisdom that we possess, that we can tap into by chanting to the Gohonzon, seeking that wisdom. Okay? This doesn't happen just by shuffling through. You have to actually read what it says, go, aha, and then change the direction of your thinking to conform to the aha. Okay? Because the aha happens to everybody individually based on their own karma. Right? Okay, so when the aha moment comes, you change, you transform. Why you chant? You don't chant to get benefits. Of course, you're still utilizing Daimoku in your daily practice and being the Buddha to conform the things that you need and desire in your environment, but they're not just for you. You're constantly understanding that you're doing this for the sake of validating and proving the power and being the Buddha that you've been able to become by embracing Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the great pure law that's expounded in the 5th 500-year period and beyond for 10,000 years into infinity, according to Nichiren and according to the Lotus Sutra. All right, you're with me?
Yes.
Okay, so Nichiren then goes on to list one more reason for his immense joy. Being able to repay the debts of gratitude that he owes, the heart of Buddha's practice. He expresses his delight at having been given an opportunity to do so. In this letter, therefore, he writes of the joy he derives from reading the Lotus Sutra with his life and from selflessly dedicating his life to propagating the correct teaching of Buddhism, thereby repaying his debts of gratitude. Do you understand? It's the same process for us. We don't incorporate, we don't come up with our own mantra of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, but we do all the things that we've already, that again, read the Teacher of the Law chapter of the Lotus Sutra. It totally correlates to everything that's being said here, all right? And it totally is speaking of you, not of someone other than you, all right? So he says, his lofty and indomitable state of life can inspire us to see the hardships and obstacles we personally encounter as ideal opportunities for elevating our life condition, doing human revolution, powering through the obstacles to utilize the power of faith and the power of practice to create what we want in our environment. Through his own example, he demonstrated that facing difficulties with courage can fill our life with boundless joy. So he's lived the life that we will live to be the example that he was for us now. We're going to continue to be that example in real time. All right? When we reflect that this letter was written while the Daishonin was living in exile, it becomes all the more moving. As I have said, Kudo Yoshitaka, the letter's recipient, lived in Tojo village in Awa province. The village steward, Tojo Koganobu, was extremely hostile toward Nichiren and brought heavy pressure to bear on his followers in the area. Aware of the challenging situation, the top of page 103, Nichiren wrote Kudo this letter from Izu, communicating his own invincible spirit in the midst of adversity, along with the message, I am here, so have courage. Carry on my struggle for the sake of the law. So he's saying, you continue to do your thing to encourage the people around you while I'm lifted from this situation. I'm in exile. Toward the end of this letter, Nichiren turns his attention to the second important matter, namely his intense grief. He says that in light of the principle of the Lotus Sutra, he feels great sorrow that many people are slandering the Lotus Sutra and creating negative karma by persecuting him for his efforts to propagate the mystic law. Again, all delineated in the sutra itself. He's not talking about this for the embellishment of his own importance. He's qualifying that what the sutra says is absolutely true, and so the people that are persecuting me because I'm doing what the sutra said I will be persecuted for if I do. Okay, and because I know this to be true, then what the sutra says will be the result of the karma of those people that inflict that upon the votary in the latter day will also be true, and therefore they're going to get some karma from this. He says, but Buddhism also teaches the benefit, continuing on page 103, first column middle, but Buddhism also teaches the benefit arising from a reverse relationship with the Lotus Sutra. There are two ways of forming a connection with the mystic law, one through acceptance and the other through rejection, the latter of which corresponds to the reverse relationship. Either way, the benefit of encountering the mystic law is engraved in the individual's life. Those who initially slander the Lotus Sutra will experience negative consequences per the workings of cause and effect, but in the end they are certain to attain enlightenment through the power of the mystic law. In this letter, Nichiren's grief is not for his own predicament. Rather, it expresses his infinite compassion imbued with a powerful resolve to help even his detractors and persecutors attain enlightenment. Nichiren felt the same when he was exiled to Sado. He states, I pray that before anything else I can guide and lead the ruler and those who persecuted me, wanting to, no matter what, help the rulers who persecuted him. This displays the compassionate philosophy and action of Buddhism to save any kind of person. Any kind of person. So we shouldn't make distinctions either. Mm-hmm. He made this declaration in exile in the midst of his persecution, except to seek out evil people, because he's already qualified. Don't go there. Uh-huh. Do understand that. In Nichiren's pronouncements of immense joy and intense grief are declarations drawing attention to the limitless power and potential that resides within the human being. Okay, going on from where we left off last week, page 103. Vanquishing the devil king of the sixth heaven through the power of faith. This world is called the Sahe world, Sahe meaning endurance. This is why the Buddha is called the one who can endure. That would then pertain to all of us as well. This world is inhabited by people who were rejected from the Pure Lands in the 10 directions. They have committed the 10 evil acts or the 5 cardinal sins, slandered the worthies and sages, and have been unfilial to their fathers and mothers or disrespectful to the monks. For these offenses, and this is again, that would be right out of the encouraging devotion chapter, right? Mm-hmm. For these offenses, they fell into the 3 evil paths, and only after dwelling there for countless kalpas were they reborn in this world. Yet, the residue of the evil karma formed in their previous existence has not yet been eradicated, and they still tend to perpetuate the 10 evil acts or the 5 cardinal sins, to revile the worthies and sages, and to be undutiful to their fathers and mothers or irreverent toward the monks. As I mentioned earlier at the top of page 104, continuing with President Ikeda's lecture. As I mentioned earlier, the world in which we dwell is the Sahe world, the world of endurance. It is also referred to as an impure land. Nichiren notes that in pure lands, the people, being pure of heart, do not abuse or persecute worthies and sages. But in the impure land, that is the Sahe world, the people's lives are tainted with negative karma from having committed the 10 evil acts and the 5 cardinal sins. It is a realm filled with multitudes of corrupt and malicious people who revile worthies and sages and are disrespectful toward those who uphold the correct teaching of Buddhism. So when you run into those kind of people, don't be surprised, right? In addition, the workings of the devil king of the sixth heaven manifest in the form of opposition from close family members or powerful figures of authority. That is, the 3 obstacles and 4 devils, or the 3 powerful enemies, appear in an attempt to persuade people in the Sahe world to abandon their faith in the Lotus Sutra. Okay, and to abandon their faith in the Lotus Sutra after the 5th 500-year period is to abandon their faith in Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and the teachings of Nichiren. Do you understand that? All right? It's the same thing. He's saying the same thing, but it means something specific as it relates to us and now. We're not reading 28th chapter Lotus Sutra, okay, and basing it on that teaching. We're basing it on the great pure law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo as taught by Nichiren, as exemplified in the life of President Makaguchi, President Toda, President Ikeda. That's the whole point you must also understand. This is all very specific to the Soka philosophy right now. The devil king of the sixth heaven is because the practice that was practiced prior to the SGI did not bring out the three powerful enemies or three obstacles and four devils. No one attained Buddhahood while practicing that way because you didn't even chant Daimoku. You didn't do Gongyo. You went to the temple on Sundays or once a week and let the priest do all that work. You gave the priest, yes. That's why when we do Gongyo and they make such a big deal about the three presidents and they talk about the Soka Gakkai for the 10,000 years of Mappo and all that stuff. None of this existed in this form, in this specificity of how you do it. Actual proof of people doing it didn't exist. Okay, so that's why we put so much confidence in what this is saying, because it's been actualized by people in contemporary times as being a correct way, a correct methodology. He's saying the devil king of the sixth heaven is the manifestation of fundamental darkness or ultimate disbelief, the inability to believe, which can be overcome only through the power of faith in the mystic law. That's the only way you can reverse that karma. As Nietzsche, but once you've made a connection to the law, you can't ever get away from it. That's the beautiful thing. That's that reverse relationship he was talking about. As Nietzsche states, the single word belief is the sharp sword with which one confronts and overcomes fundamental darkness or ignorance. Okay? And that happens at stage 3 and beyond, not stage 1 or stage 2. Do you understand? When fundamental darkness is vanquished by the power of faith, our lives become one with the mystic law. So now then, when we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to the Gohonzon, is there a separation between us and the object of devotion? No. We are one and the same with the object of devotion. We are one and the same with the law of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. We're one and the same with the life of Nichiren Daishonin. We're one and the same with the mind of the Buddha. Do you understand? All right. So he says this is the meaning of attaining Buddhahood, because that's what it is. All right. Going on page 104. Living in the Sahe world in the latter day of the law. Living in the world of endurance in the 500-year period and beyond, in the 2,000 years and beyond after Shakyamuni's death, which is the latter day. In the lifespan, the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni says that ever since attaining Buddhahood in the remote past, he has constantly been in the Sahe world, preaching the law and guiding people to enlightenment. This passage expresses such Buddhist principles as the Sahe world is itself the land of eternally tranquil light, earthly desires lead to enlightenment, and the world of Buddhahood is inherent in the 9 worlds. Everybody was with me on all 3 of those, right? The Lotus Sutra teaches that when we bring forth our inherent, which means it was always there, all right? It's part of us. It's a part of our true identity. When the Lotus Sutra teaches that when we bring forth our inherent Buddhahood, based on faith in the mystic law, faith in Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we can transform any environment or set of circumstances into a Buddha land, a land of tranquil light, okay? A land where nothing phases us or makes us unhappy. The circumstances are ephemeral and temporary. We understand that with the wisdom of the Buddha. We understand why we're living the life that we're living, why the things that are happening to us are happening, and we know how to overcome them and turn poison into medicine. And that's what we get the greatest joy from, because that validates we're badasses. We're bodhisattvas of the earth. Frankly speaking, all bodhisattvas of the earth are badasses. Don't ever let anybody try to take that from you. That is a fact. In Nichiren Buddhism, this challenge to transform our environment or circumstances, and why are we going through all this shit to do all this stuff? To take this hard road? Because we're masochists?
To bring out the Buddhahood.
To transform the environment from the Sahe world into the land of eternally tranquil light, to establish Kosen Rufu. Are we the only ones that benefit from Kosen Rufu? No. All living beings benefit from Kosen Rufu. This challenge to transform our environment or circumstance is the essence of our faith for attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime, because that's the reason we got to have before we can actually attain Buddhahood in our present form. Buddhas don't become Buddhas in order to be Buddhas.
No.
Okay? They become Buddhas in order to teach others and make them equal to themselves. That's why a Buddha makes his advent. We don't come back to be rock stars or to get acclaim or anything beyond the joy that we receive from doing whatever it is our karmic mission reveals by virtue of our life. All right? In Nichiren Buddhism, going back to the middle of that second paragraph, in Nichiren Buddhism, this challenge to transform our environment or circumstances is the essence of our faith for attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime and of our efforts to establish the correct teaching for the peace of the land, which is Kosen Rufu. Right? In this letter, Nichiren writes, the Buddha is also called the one who can endure. The ability to endure extolled here is not simply a passive ability to withstand hardship or suffering. That comes from saying, oh, it's my karma. Okay, it's my karma.
Yeah.
I just accept my karma. You're not looking at it from the perspective of, that's your karma, so what are you going to do about it now? Okay, you're just going to passively, I'm going to suck it all up until I die. My happiness is in the ability to suck it up. No, it isn't. Your happiness is not in the ability to suck it up. It's to transform it, to show that it's not anything that you're powerless to manifest a change to. In other words, to be the Buddha. In this letter, Nichiren writes, the Buddha is called one who can endure. The ability to endure extolled here is not simply a passive ability to withstand hardship or suffering. It refers more important to having a powerful, persevering commitment to the path of inner transformation in order to build a world of true and lasting peace and happiness for all. In other words, it refers more important to having a powerful, persevering faith in the fact that you are the Buddha, revealing that through your actions, actually getting to stage 6, and in that process, creating Kosen Rufu through your own existence, your own little life. Your own little life leads to the enlightenment of many, many others. The enlightenment of many, many others is what transforms the environment to Kosen Rufu. Do you understand? So you are not just another brick in the road. You're a very important cog because there are people relying on your Buddhahood to attain their own. Trust that you have people that you've been teaching, that you've been bringing along, that is essential for you to transform what you have to transform for them to be able to get where they got to go. All right? So he's saying that this is all about Kosen Rufu. Again, this is all about being the Buddha in your present form. In another letter, also composed during the Izu exile, Nichiren writes, if I do not call forth these 3 enemies of the Lotus Sutra, then I will not be the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Only by making them appear can I be the votary. What does that say about us then? Same thing. Only by making them appear can you really be called a bodhisattva of the earth. Okay? Because if you're not practicing in the way that makes them appear, you're not practicing for yourself and others. When you're close to attaining Buddhahood, when you're actually on that path, when you're stage 5, really, okay? Demonstrating his phenomenal capacity to endure, Nichiren called forth the 3 powerful enemies and soundly triumphed over them, leaving the example for all of us to do the same thing. Through his unflagging struggle, he opened the great path for enlightenment of all people into the eternal future. That's why we can follow that path. That's what that's saying. The sign of a genuine votary of the Lotus Sutra. So what does that say just right there? We're calling Nichiren the votary of the Lotus Sutra, the latter day of the law. But is he the only votary of the Lotus Sutra? No, all of his disciples are equal to him. He says so. Okay? So the sign of a genuine votary of the Lotus Sutra, the sign of you. The Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? When I read this passage, this is from the Gosho. When I read this passage for the first time, I did not think that the situation would be as bad as it predicts. Now I am struck by the unfailing accuracy of the Buddha's words, especially in light of my present circumstances. He says, I have been blamed merely for trying to propagate the Lotus Sutra. Though I have neither wife nor child, I am known throughout the country as a monk who transgresses the code of conduct. And even though I've never killed even a single ant or mole cricket, my bad reputation is spread throughout the realm. This may well resemble the situation of Shakyamuni Buddha, who was slandered by a multitude of non-Buddhists during his lifetime. It seems that solely because my faith in the Lotus Sutra accords slightly more with its teaching than does the faith of others, because I brought forth Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, all right? Evil demons must have possessed their bodies and be causing them to feel hatred toward me. I am nothing but a lowly and ignorant monk without precepts, yet when I think that such a person should be mentioned in the Lotus Sutra, which was expounded more than 2,000 years ago, and that the Buddha prophesied that person would encounter persecution, I cannot possibly express my joy. Again, read chapter 10. In the passages of the Lotus Sutra, in the passages that come just before this, Nichiren noted the fierce persecutions that assailed practitioners of the Lotus Sutra during Shakyamuni's lifetime. He goes on in this section to cite a passage from the Teacher of the Law, the 10th chapter of the sutra. Since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? That's also the chapter that talks about the people that come to propagate this law in that time will be people that chose to do that. So what you're experiencing isn't from bad karma. Understand that. You chose to create the karma that would create this circumstance for you to overcome. It's not here to be an obstacle that you have to somehow defeat. You've already created, your ability to defeat is already there. It's guaranteed if you just follow ABC. All right? He says, since hatred and jealousy toward the sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? He then says that when he compares this prediction to his own situation, just like you could if you read chapter 10, he realizes how utterly and completely true it is. Because you'll get goosebumps from reading chapter 10. If you have a connection with the Gohonzon, trust me, it's impossible for you not to. He writes, I, Nichiren, do not observe the precepts with my body, neither do I. Nor is my heart free from the three poisons, neither is mine. Declaring himself to be an ordinary person, so am I, he asserts that he has been cursed and maligned by those who do not know how to repay their debt of gratitude, and it is taught that they will never be able to attain Buddhahood. Lacking gratitude, persons of the two vehicles could not transcend their self-centeredness. They could not recognize that all people possess the Buddha nature. Consequently, they could neither reveal their own Buddha nature nor experience the joy of helping others do the same. Are you with me? Okay, so do you understand what he's saying? It's only because of the others that you're able to do all of this. All right? It is like Shakyamuni's disciple Shariputra, who in the past existence abandoned his bodhisattva practice because he was unable to endure the spiteful reaction of the Brahmin to whom he had offered his eye. Everybody knows that, right? The Brahmin stomps on it and he goes, God damn, if you could do that. And he went backwards for a long time. When his altruistic act was rejected and ridiculed, Shariputra found himself unable to maintain his dedication to help others, and he fell into the trap of seeking enlightenment for himself alone. That's why he's one of the people of the two vehicles, right? Again, in the letter to Horan, Nichiren writes, among the living beings of the six paths and the four forms of birth, there are both men and women. And these men and women all were our parents at some point in our past existences. Everyone we encounter in this lifetime is someone to whom we owe a debt of gratitude from past existences. That's the point that he's making. It's not about the people that we like. or the people we show preference to. It's we should have this sense toward all living beings. That was the whole point of the 4 debts of gratitude, right? One of them is the debt we owe to all living beings. This is qualifying why all living beings, not just the good ones or the ones that have the karma or the ones that deserve it or the ones that respect and appreciate it, all right? As practitioners of Nichiren Buddhism, we strive to support our fellow members and help others become happy, since we owe them all a tremendous debt of gratitude. All right? If we lose sight of this important spirit of practice for others, Jigyo Keita, we will close ourselves off in a world of self-interest. So if we only need benefit for ourselves, if the only reason we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is for our stuff, our problems, our advance, you'll never get there. The Gohonzon will stop working quite as well as it used to. Trust me. You'll figure it out. You'll have to. Our Buddhist practice is, in one respect, a struggle to overcome such self-centeredness where everything is about me. I want benefits from me. My daimoku is for me. My practice is for me. Without a sense of gratitude to the Gohonzon, to our mentors, we can neither break through our own shells nor hope to accomplish our human revolution. Again, I've told you many times, my mentors is why I'm able to be who I am. What they taught me is what I understand and know and have been able to draw from my practice and the teaching. At any rate, life presents us with an unending series of challenges. All of us in the Sahe world, the world of endurance, we need to have endurance and persistence sustained by a rich and profound spirit of appreciation for all those bad things that make us chant Daimoku, all those struggles that make us advance. Because in the absence of them, there would be nothing to motivate us to do that, and we would not take that difficult path, trust me. By a rich and profound spirit of appreciation and a deep wish to repay our gratitude to our mentor and to the teaching. In encouraging devotion, the 13th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, we find the passage, we reverently trusting in the Buddha will put on the armor of perseverance. Genuine disciples never evade their responsibility for Kosen Rufu, no matter what unfounded or unfair criticism is directed at them, or whether their efforts are recognized or not. Carrying an inner dialogue with their mentor, they care about the happiness of others and strive tirelessly to show their gratitude to their mentor. That's Daisaku Ikeda talking about his relationship with Josei Toda. Let's read that paragraph again. It's a very important one. Genuine disciples, because mentor is whoever floats your boat and helps you get to that next stage, okay? It's not some sort of, my mentor is like, Jesus and I'm a disciple of Jesus. No, that's not. Mentor and disciple are exactly the same, right? There's not one higher and one lower, okay? What can appear to be the mentor in in one phase of life can be ultimately, again, all right, Dozenbo was what, when we talk about on repaying debts of gratitude, right? That's the Gosho, one of the 5 major writings we've already read. Who is that written in honor of? To Dozenbo, who never was his teacher at Seichoji, right? But that debt of gratitude extended on and after Dozenbo had never actually taken it upon himself to embrace the Daishonin's teachings, reject all the other ones as the Daishonin had suggested he would, and so forth and so on. So, though Dozenbo started out being a mentor, ultimately you can't qualify Nichiren as being somebody that was at a sub-level to his original teacher, right? So mentor and disciple, you could think that the mentor came first, so the disciple must be of a less. No, because this is all mixed up in terms of karma. Who came first, Shakyamuni or Nichiren? Who's the one that leads everybody to true Buddhahood? Nichiren, the one that came later. So it's not about who came first and who came second. They should be viewed absolutely in accordance with one another, because what you accomplish is your mentor's victory as well. So when he says genuine disciples never evade their responsibility for Kosen Rufu, That means faith to the last moment of their life and devoting themselves to upholding the law to others, teaching others how to become Buddhas as well. No matter what unfounded or unfair criticism is directed at them. That may not have happened to you, but it can. It's happened to me. All right? It's happened certainly to President Ikeda. It's happened to several of my mentors. It's happened to a lot of people that I know. That is part of the deal. Don't let that affect you. He says, no matter or whether their efforts are recognized or not. So you're not doing this to get credit from people, for them to tell how smart you are, or how much you helped them, or whether they are so appreciative of what you did in trying to help them. If they step on the eyeball you just offered them, you must still have that compassion and that caring for them. He says, carrying on an inner dialogue with their mentor. They care about the happiness of others and strive tirelessly to show their gratitude to their mentor. What is that talking about? Again, carrying on an inner dialogue with their mentor. I do all the time in front of the Gohonzon. Okay, when I'm chanting in front of the Gohonzon, I can talk to Terosaki. I can talk to Josei Toda, who I never met. I can talk to even Daisaku Ikeda, who's still alive. I can have all these internalized conversations that are born on some karmic wind that I don't know why I think that way or why I feel that way, but it's absolutely true. What he's saying here, absolutely, I do without having read it in a paragraph. That's why I can say to you, what he's saying here is absolutely true. Through striving in this way, they can develop into people, eventually, who can feel appreciation for everything in life, because it doesn't start out that way. That comes from Buddha wisdom. And they can attain the expansive life state of Buddhahood, because that's what they're able to do by virtue of that, and enjoy unsurpassed happiness. It's not predicated on the circumstance. It's predicated on the wisdom of understanding, perceiving your life correctly for what it actually is. Okay, going on to page 109, top of the page from the Gosho. The importance of transmitting the teachings. The fourth is the debt owed to the three treasures, going from the Gosho. How could we possibly repay our debt to the Buddha? Concerning the debt owed to the law is the teacher of all Buddhas. It is because of the law that the Buddhas are worthy of respect. Therefore, those who wish to repay their debt to the Buddha must first repay the debt they owe to the law. As for the debt owed to the Buddhist, this is page 109, first column. As for the debt owed to the Buddhist order, both the treasure of the Buddha and the treasure of the law are invariably perpetuated by the order. In other words, they don't exist without the order. They cannot be separated from the order. You can't say one's more important than the other, because the whole deal doesn't work unless all of it's integrated into the functionality of reality. Okay? So he says, to illustrate, without firewood, there can be no fire. If there is no earth, trees, plants cannot grow. Likewise, even though Buddhism existed without the members of the order who studied it and passed it on, it would have never been transmitted throughout the 2,000 years of the former and the middle days and the latter day of the law. So even though he's in the 500-year period, even though Lotus Sutra is only about the 2,000-year period after Shakyamuni's death, we still revere it, we still respect it, but we understand it from the light of the moment of the reality that we exist, right? The fourth of the four debts of gratitude is that owed to the three treasures. In other words, the Buddha that expounds the teaching, the law or teaching the Buddha expounds, and the Buddhist order or gathering of people who believe in the Buddha and the teachings. The Buddha here, of course, refers to Shakyamuni, because he's talking about the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren shares an anecdote about Shakyamuni's lifespan as a benefit of his practices. The Buddha had made the causes to reach an age of 120 years, but he only used 2/3 of those years, passing away at age 80, the 40 unlived years an offering to all living beings, as it were. As we can surmise from this passage, Shakyamuni's compassionate life was utterly dedicated to the law and the happiness of all people. We owe the Buddha a truly immense and deep debt of gratitude, and that debt extends also to the law and the Buddhist order. Nichiren explains that the law, as the fundamental source of enlightenment, is the teacher of all Buddhas. Therefore, to repay our debt of gratitude to the Buddha, he asserts, we must first repay our debt of gratitude to the law or the teachings. He further notes that without the members of the Buddhist order, the community of practitioners who study the Buddha's teachings and pass them on, the treasure of the Buddha and the treasure of the law could not be communicated to society or bring benefit to people. They could not exist as they need to. Offering a metaphor, he likens the treasures of the Buddha and the law to plants and trees, and the Buddhist order to the earth from which they grow. In the context of this letter, we can say that the Buddhist order refers specifically to the votary of the Lotus Sutra, in other words, Nichiren Daishonin. Moreover, the Lotus Sutra was expounded for an age after Shakyamuni's passing. In this context of this letter, we can say that the Buddhist order refers specifically to the votary of the Lotus Sutra. In other words, Nichiren Daishonin. Moreover, the Lotus Sutra was expounded for the age after Shakyamuni's passing. Unless a true votary of the Lotus Sutra emerged in the latter day of the law, the Lotus Sutra would be rendered false. That would result in the end of Buddhism. Without the earth, in other words, there could be no plants and trees. We must recognize, therefore, that Nichiren is this true votary of the law in the latter day. Understand? Mm-hmm. All right. The appropriate teacher for us, the true Buddhas that are his original disciples, the Bodhisattvas of the earth. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. All right. When people of the latter day, which is specifically talking about those of us that make our advent as disciples of Nichiren, frankly, all right? When people of the latter day place their trust in Nichiren Daishonin and make his teachings, the nourishing earth of their lives, they can, with great energy and vitality, bring to flower unsurpassed happiness in their lives and peace in society based on the correct teaching. Everybody's with me? Mm-hmm. It is important to properly understand the true meaning of Buddhist order here, okay? Because we can rely on the law and not upon persons. We can get into all of that falderall and misunderstanding. But it's important that we properly understand the true meaning of the Buddhist order here. The original Sanskrit word of Sangha, or Sanghe, however it's pronounced, meaning a gathering, assembly, or group. It does not denote priests. There were no priests at the time. One qualifies as a member of the Sangha not through superficial acts such as shaving one's head or donning clerical robes, but through genuinely upholding and transmitting the teachings of Buddhism. Okay? You can't do that unless you've done it for yourself. And now once you've done it for yourself, you must do it for others. In light of this, in the realm of Nichiren Buddhism, the treasure of the Buddhist order is none other than the members of the SGI, or those that practice in the same accordance, the harmonious body of practitioners striving with the spirit of the oneness of mentor and disciple for the sake of Kosen Rufu, just as Nichiren teaches. Just as Nichiren teaches. So if you practice just as Nichiren teaches, if you have the same mind as Nichiren, you qualify for that. Column 2, page 110. Nothing compares to a life of gratitude. Nichiren Daishonin revealed the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the fundamental law underlying all things in the universe. He read the Lotus Sutra with his life and left us the formula for realizing Kosen Rufu into the eternal future. The collection of his writings is a record of how he read the sutra with his life, and it is also the fruit of his boundless compassion for others. In modern times, we of the SGI alone are reading his writings with our lives. We are practicing as Buddhas in our present form. Not members of Nichiren Shoshu, frankly. Actually, or any of the other Buddhist sects. In modern times, we of the SGI alone are reading his writings with our lives, actually translating Nichiren's teachings into action. Both Mr. Makaguchi and Mr. Toda taught through their own lives the true way to read these writings. This is why we still applaud their greatness. This is why we mention them in the prayers of Gongo. Okay? It's because what they led to as it relates to their example for the rest of us, and the same formula is working for us. It never existed prior to them in the form that we actually utilize it. Following Nichiren's teachings and remaining steadfast in faith with a total commitment to Kosen Rufu, Mr. Makaguchi called forth the three powerful enemies and died in prison for his beliefs. What did he do to start that process? How did that happen to Makaguchi? What made him go to prison? What did he take it upon himself to do? This is again why we're not talking about priests, we're talking about lay members here. This is why we talk about Makaguchi and Toda. What did they do? What has Daisaku Ikeda done? He's been slandered up and down. I guarantee you that guy Tai talking about don't rely on persons. Everybody thinks that's like, don't listen to Daisaku Ikeda, which is bullshit. Okay, Daisaku Ikeda is a correct teacher. All right, and he's lived his life as best he could in accordance with the example that was preceded him by Toda and Makaguchi. What did Makaguchi do to have the shit hit the fan? Why did he go to prison? Because he went to the head temple and remonstrated with the high priest and all of the high priest's lieutenants and said, you guys are doing the wrong thing. How can you dare take the Shinto talisman and put it in the place where we chanted the Daigo Hanzan? Yeah, they said that they'd burn down the temple or do whatever they're going to do to you if you do that, but that doesn't give you a right to then lead everybody else astray into believing that that's the correct thing to do, because that's totally going against Nichiren's teachings. All right? It's because of that remonstration with the high... Who turned him into the governmental authorities? The Nichiren Choshu priesthood. Yes. Why do you think President Toda came after the war with all those youth division leaders that scared the shit out of him and said, if you ever do this again, the shit's going to hit the fan? Why do you think there was that conflict with Nichiren Shoshu priesthood and the Soka Gakkai from that point going forward? Even though SGI was the biggest benefactor to that sect. That sect had been the smallest sect when Makaguchi had encountered those teachings. But they had Nikko Shonin as the basis in IKKO. Of the philosophy that they upheld and understood. They understood Nichiren to be the teacher and the law. Okay? So, that's what they're talking about here. Both Mr. Makaguchi and Mr. Toda taught through their own lives the true way to read these writings. This is why we still applaud their greatness. Why I can talk the way I talk is because of what they taught and what they lived. Okay? Following Nichiren's teachings and remaining steadfast in faith with a total commitment to Kosen Rufu, Mr. Makaguchi called forth the three powerful enemies and died in prison for his beliefs, upholding the correct teaching. Mr. Toda, who was likewise in prison, also never regressed in his spiritual struggle, despite suffering terribly. They over and over said, all you got to do is renounce this shit and we'll let you out of here. Is Makaguchi still here? Yes, I'm not going anywhere. Okay? His spiritual struggle, despite suffering terribly, the harsh conditions taking a heavy toll on his health. When he was eventually released, he stood up alone amid the devastation of post-war Japan and single-handedly rebuilt the Soka Gakkai, enabling it to go on to achieve its present growth. Through the life and death struggles, these are people that really did live and did die because of how they practiced, with the kind of faith that they practiced. Through the life and death struggles of our first two presidents, our great gathering of bodhisattvas of the earth, the true followers of Nichiren Daishonin, was summoned forth. As a disciple and as a youth, I succeeded to the noble struggle of Mr. Makaguchi and Mr. Toda and worked with our members to open the way to worldwide Kosen Rufu. Why do we know this teaching here? Why is it translated in so many languages? Why did somebody like Burton Watson do all the work for translation? Nobody can confront us on the teaching. The Soka Gakkai has paid for the most unbelievable scholarly edification of these ancient texts. Mr. Toda and worked with members to open the way for worldwide Kosen Rufu. These two mentors reminded each of us of the bond we shared with Nichiren from the remote past. They taught us how to be bodhisattvas of the earth. They taught us a purpose in life that was infinitely fulfilling and eternally rewarding beyond compare, the realization of Kosen Rufu as bodhisattvas of the earth. Mr. Toda said, although we are unenlightened, ordinary people, when we come into contact with the Daishonen's absolute conviction and passion, we cannot help but feel the flame of faith blaze up still higher in our hearts. By whom then will this sacred undertaking for Kosen Rufu be accomplished? It is impossible to fathom the Buddha's will. However, it is plain that nobody other than the Soka Gakkai is equal to this endeavor. Since the time of President Makaguchi, it has been the fate and destiny of the Soka Gakkai to accomplish this. Our task is but to advance, to strive our hardest. Only the Soka Gakkai can achieve Kosen Rufu. The Soka Gakkai is the organization that can proudly lay claim to being a harmonious community of practitioners, the true Sangha of the Lotus Sutra. We will never forget the enormous gratitude. I will never forget the enormous gratitude I owe my mentor, who taught me this solemn mission that is the Buddha's decree. Proclaiming his greatness to the entire world and for the sake of posterity is the proper thing to do as a human being and a true disciple. This is how I have lived my life. Pardon me. This is how I have lived my life, how I have struggled for more than 6 decades, since the days of my youth. Therefore, I have not the slightest regret. What an invigorating life this is, and what an admirable way to spend one's youth. I hope that you, my youthful successors, will follow in my footsteps and lead lives of complete victory, more expansive and invigorating than mine. Lives as vast as the ocean and as serene as the loftiest peaks. To all our fellow bodhisattvas of the earth in the youth division, I impart these words of the French author Romain Rolland. Did I pronounce that correct?
Romain Rolland.
Say it again.
Romain Rolland.
Romain Rolland. Okay. Youth of today, it is your turn. Make us your stepping stones and press forward. Be greater and happier than us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.